All right, guys, so I am chatting with Ricki Heller, who is a registered holistic nutritionist. She actually went to the very same school that I did, the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. She runs the site Diet, Dessert, and Dogs, and she's also the author of a cookbook called Sweet Freedom, which is about some delicious and healthy whole food desserts. And Ricki, your main focus is Anti-Candida because you went through a Candida overgrowth, right?
Yeah, I did. I would say, the overgrowth now has abated, but yeah, I'm still on the diet actually at this point too.
Okay. How did it happen? How did you become, how did the Candida overgrowth happen? It's hard to know how to say
How
that,
to
isn't it?
phrase it? Yeah, because we don't know exactly how it happens, but yeah, I think it's sort of a cumulative thing, and because through my whole life I have loved eating sweets, and I've been a sugar addict and grew up in a home where we had lots of desserts and things like that. So over time, what happens is you start developing these symptoms, and you can attribute them almost directly to the sugar consumption, which triggers a cascade of reactions, and then before you know it, the candida has grown out of control. So that's one way, and I think that's probably for me what the major impetus was. But I think for a lot of people, it has to do with things like taking long-term antibiotics, which can destroy the gut bacteria and just creates an opening for the candida. So there are different things that can cause it, but in my case, I think it really had to do with years of just being addicted to sugar and sweets.
It makes a lot of sense because Candida is getting to be so common, and sugar and antibiotics are used so regularly that the connection really makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the symptoms that clued you into Candida, and what kind of tests did you have? Doctors did you see? How did you figure it out?
Well, I think the first thing for a lot of people, and this was for me too, is very intense sugar cravings. So you would either crave pure sugar or sweet things or refined carb foods. And I was just a junk food junkie. So always eating like cakes and cookies and things like that, combining the refined carbs and the sugar. So that's one key symptom. And then another one that a lot of people report is what they call foggy brain or fuzzy thinking, where you just sort of feel like you're always wading through a fog and you can't focus really clearly on things. You can't concentrate the way you used to. So that's a huge symptom for a lot of people. And then I think the third one for women in particular is recurrent vaginal yeast infections that you just can't seem to get rid of for any length of time. As soon as it seems to clear up, maybe a week later or so, it comes back. So I'd say those are the three key ones. And then there's a whole host of other symptoms that you could potentially have too. Um, you had asked about how I determined that I had candida overgrowth.
Hmm.
So yeah, the first time I was on the diet was like 10 years ago, and I just suspected because I'd been reading about it a little bit, and I had those three main symptoms. But I did go to see a holistically minded MD who basically diagnosed me and put me on the diet 10 years ago. So when it came around again this time, I kind of already knew, and I tried to avoid it, but eventually when I went to see that same doc again, she confirmed that it was candida again.
Wow, so you've actually had it twice.
Yeah, and I suspect I've even had it more than that. I mean, years ago in my 30s, before anybody knew what candida was, I was a newlywed and I was suffering from recurrent yeast infections, and nobody knew what to do about it. And I think looking back, that that's probably what was going on at that time too.
Mm.
One of the things this doctor told me, which makes a lot of sense, is that once you have had, or once you've been diagnosed with candida and you've treated it, those people tend to be more prone to getting it again. And lucky us, if you get it again, it tends to be worse and worse each time and harder to get rid of each time it comes back. So for those of you out there who may be treating it for the first time, make sure that it's completely gone and don't let yourself fall back into those habits again like I did.
Yeah, so what are the main points of the anti-Candida diet that you followed?
Number one, I think the most important thing, well, as I said, is the diet. So sugar, avoiding all kinds of sugars. For most people, for the very first stage of it, maybe a month or so, you're not even allowed most fruits. Nothing that has sugar or sweeteners in it. You avoid things like moldy foods because candida is a mold and your body reacts kind of the same way. You avoid fermented foods, which feed on sugars. And most of the diets also have you go gluten-free because gluten is an allergic trigger for so many people. And they're just trying to keep your immune system as calm as possible. So you don't want to be overtaxing the immune system trying to deal with this gluten problem, if there is one. So just to be safe, we take everybody off gluten too.
Hmm. Now,
Yeah.
I had a friend who went on an anti-candida diet, and she was told to cut out apple cider vinegar, and I noticed on your site you say it's a little bit iffy.
Yep.
What's the deal there?
Yeah, there are certain things like apple cider vinegar. I think tempeh is another one, which are technically fermented foods. So one of the things they try to avoid on the diet is fermented foods because fermentation often either creates or feeds on sugar. And so if you're looking at things like regular vinegar, usually they add sugar to cause it to ferment. But the theory with apple cider vinegar is that it's a naturally fermented food. So it's sort of a brewing from ingredients that are in the air anyway. Sort of the way, I don't know if you've ever made homemade sauerkraut, and it's just the natural bacteria that cause it to ferment.
Yeah,
So,
my husband makes that actually.
okay, so there you go. So the theory that's pro the apple cider vinegar says, well, it's a natural kind of fermentation, and you actually have some good bacteria that are good for the body. And there have been a whole bunch of studies that have shown that apple cider vinegar is actually antifungal and antimicrobial. So the people who are on the side of drinking it say it's the only vinegar you really should have because it can be antifungal. So it's interesting. The one thing I have found, in particular this time around, because I'm hearing from so many people who are on the diet now, is that there are almost as many anti-candida diets as there are people and metabolisms. So what works for one may or may not work for another. There are certain rules like no sugars, certain absolute steadfast rules. But then there are a few categories like the apple cider vinegar, the tempeh, certain fruits that seem to work with some people and not with others. And I think you just have to try what works for you and see, Um,
That's
and
so interesting. I hadn't heard that before. I mean, obviously in terms of just your average diet, that some things work for people and some things don't work for others, but I haven't heard it specifically about the anti-candida diet.
well, as I said, there are certain things that no one should have, like sugars, but things like the apple cider vinegar, which are antifungal, for some people they cause a reaction and for some people they don't. And it's interesting because I kind of tested it out because I felt like I was so deprived. So I tested it out near the beginning, had an almost immediate reaction. And now that I've been on this diet for like a year, or I'm sorry, 2 years, I can have apple cider vinegar. I'm okay with it now in small quantities. Same thing with coconut sugar, which I could not at all have at the beginning. It caused like an immediate reaction. I had cravings and my symptoms got worse, but now I can have a little bit here and there.
Now, did you take any supplements, herbals, probiotics, anything like that?
I sure did. Oh yeah, I took whatever they could give you for candida. I took it. Yeah. Um, I think I've said this on my site, but my situation, the doctor said I was an anomaly in this, in that it was a really strong candida infection, a very difficult case, which took much longer than most people to clear up, and it's even not 100% clear now. So they had me on the whole complement of things, but mostly my naturopath put me on a product called Candida Stop, which is a supplement that has several different herbs and nutrients and vitamins and minerals and things in it that all work together to fight the candida. So I think the primary ingredients in that one are caprylic acid, which comes from coconut, which is an antifungal, and black walnut, which is really known for being antifungal, antiparasitic. And I think there was some oil of oregano in there as well, also a very strong antimicrobial. So I took that and I would do that. I would rotate with that. We had me on probiotics, very, very important if you're on the anti-candida diet. Once you kill off the yeast, you want to repopulate the good bacteria with probiotics. And for me, not everyone needs this, but I did need a prescription antifungal too, as well. And we did them all together until the symptoms were had calmed down enough that we could get me off the prescription.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that yours was particularly bad because it took you a while to figure it out, or was it just your particular body type?
I think it was a combination of things. Like I said, in my wayward youth, my eating habits truly were horrific. Like I think about what I would eat when I was younger. In your 20s, you can eat anything and you don't have any reaction. But when I hit my 40s, I started having reactions. And so I think I had gone through a particularly stressful period right before that. I wasn't eating well, all those things together. And then I really put off going to see someone because I was afraid it was Candida and I knew the diet and I didn't want to go on that diet. So I think I waited a couple of months before I finally had it diagnosed. And now I think back, like, what was I thinking? But yeah, so I think all of those things together, because the longer you let it live, it's going to multiply. And as my doctor put it, it's Candida is an opportunist. So it will move into any little crevice in the intestinal wall where it can grow. And once it's established itself and it sets in roots, it literally sets down roots, it's very difficult to eradicate if you let it get established for too long. And I think that's what happened with me. I may not even have known I had it for a while, and then it just went on too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Candida and other yeasts feed on sugars, like you said, and carbohydrates. So a lot of people worry about being able to follow the anti-Candida diet on a plant-based diet. Have you had any issues? What have you done to make it work?
Yeah, I think that's a big concern for a lot of people. And again, I think part of it depends on how bad your symptoms are. But even the diet that I initially followed is called Whole Approach, and it's at wholeapproach.com. And they will even allow some legumes and some starchy vegetables like squashes or sweet potato within reason at the beginning. So I think there are very few diets that completely eradicate all starches because most of them allow you to have whole grains, things like quinoa, millet, rice, brown rice, which of course has starches in it, right? So
Right.
it's not like you have to completely eradicate all starches from your diet. Now, I do know that there are some anti-candida diets that do not permit tofu, and some people just don't like tofu because there's a bit of controversy around there too. But I'm okay with tofu in moderation, and so for me, that was a lifesaver. Tofu and tempeh were lifesavers. I had them every week. And I also ate beans and legumes and nuts and seeds. You can have almost unlimited nuts and seeds. So I have to say, I didn't really find it to be a huge problem for me. It is possible. I mean, I don't know. In retrospect, it's possible that I might have prolonged my healing a little by eating some of those starches. And maybe if I had cut them out entirely, I would have gotten better faster. But I still got better. And, I didn't feel I had to compromise my diet. So I think it can be done. It's a little bit more of a challenge, maybe, but it can certainly be done.
Well, that's good to know. Now, did you uncover any hidden food allergies or sensitivities through doing your anti-Candida diet?
Well, that's an interesting question because I'm working with my naturopath still, and we've just now. It took a while. I guess we wanted to get things really stable first, but it took a while for him to suggest an elimination diet. So I'm going to be doing that in the next month or so. And just to confirm I have suspicions about certain things just because I feel like I have a reaction to them. But I have been to see conventional allergists in the past, and I have never been diagnosed with an allergy. I'm always told that I'm not allergic to anything. And just from my own physical reactions to things, I know that's not true. I believe I do have allergies. And so I'm kind of looking forward to this elimination diet. It sounds weird to say that, but just to find out what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The reason I asked is that Candida often opens up your gut to certain allergens, and also just because your site focuses on allergy-friendly recipes as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think most of the people who visit my site are already allergic to either they're lactose intolerant or they have egg allergies or the things that I wouldn't eat anyway. So for me, it's sort of naturally free of those allergens. But I also really tried to include recipes that are corn-free, soy-free, some nut-free, and sort of rotate through those so people can eat the stuff even if they have other allergies as well.
Yeah, that's great. It's really difficult for people with those types of allergies to find good resources. So it's great that you're doing all of the combination there. All right. So your site is called Diet, Dessert, and Dogs,
Yes, it
and
is.
people
My
with
three obsessions in life. Those are my the three things I'm most obsessed with: diet, dessert, and dogs. Yeah.
So for people who've been following an anti-candida diet, they might be missing dessert. What is your favorite dessert recipe for that kind of diet?
Oh, I don't know if I can tell you just one, but one of the things that I really, if you're talking about like someone who's just started the diet, one of the recipes I really relied on at the beginning is called Carob coconut sweeties. And they're sort of like little truffles. They're made with carob and almond butter and a bit of tahini and some coconut, and you roll them in little balls. And they can be eaten by someone on any stage of the diet because they don't have fruit. They're sweetened with stevia. But I will say that as you move through, like once people get to the stage where they can have, say, coconut sugar, which is a low glycemic sweetener, I have a recipe called Happy Hemp 2-bite brownies.
Ooh,
So if you've
that
ever
sounds
had the
nice.
little 2-bite brownies that look like little mini muffins,
Yeah.
these are my version of healthy 2-bite brownies, and they're great. They're grain free for people who can't or don't want to have grains, and they're made with hemp seeds and almonds as well. They're fudgy and just delicious. So I love those too. But there's so many. I mean, my site has a lot of desserts on it. So
Yes, it does. And I've seen the first dessert that you mentioned, but I haven't seen the second one. So I'm going to look that up now and go try it.
oh, good. It's very easy too. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Ricki. It's been great talking with you and learning more about Candida.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.